That the only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Hello, and welcome to the podcast at the intersection of faith and fear, where every week we discuss what scares us in order to find what saves us. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the Fear of God podcast. Speaking to you right now is one of your hosts, Nathan Rouse, and typically with me is fellow co-host Reed Lackey. And well, Reed, he was here, but he said he had to go get the harvest cake out of the oven. It sounds tasty, though. I like a cake. Maybe we will share it and consume it all in one sitting. I'm sure he'll be back any minute. I hope he got some oven mitts. In the meantime, allow me to welcome you back to our year-long umbrella series. No more of that sad conversation. This umbrella series called 2020, where we examine 20 films of the last 20 years in the year 2020, a year that feels like 20 in itself. To know more about the intention behind this series, go check out our pre-cap episode from the end of January. Today, we're looking at the year 2009. Unbelievably, 11 years ago. But I'm getting ahead of myself, everyone, though, because here at the Fear of God, we explore. We don't explain. Except for right now, when I explain that you can find the Fear of God podcast at your nearest podcast platform, on video at YouTube, and on the web at thefearofgodpodcast.com, wherein you'll find episode archives and merch, including cell phone cases, t-shirts, campaign buttons, face masks, magnets, pillows. Read! Hey, buddy. Oh no. What's the hand? It's Reed's.
I don't know what I'm doing anymore.
I can tell. But let's hope your conversational acumen exceeds your entrance capacity. Riri,
You don't talk about my conversational acumen with big words like that.
Yeah, I like that word, acumen.
Acumen.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of acumen, you want to call in our new friend to do our new segment?
Speaking of acumen, Beetlejuice.
Let's see, business section. Ooh la la, what do we got here?
So we are doing our call to action section. You know what I'm talking about. So calls to action this week. One fell off because it just doesn't matter anymore. So we do change things here, guys. No, take your pick. You figure it out. Emails for stickers. We still want your email so that you can still get a sticker. Go to the website, front page, where it says subscribe. Put your digits in, put your stuff in, put your socials in, and man, we are set, Riri.
Social media, not security number, just to be clear.
You know, potato. What's really funny is I actually meant social security number, and I wasn't even thinking about social media stuff. And I was like, oh, that's a good sort of pull out of the nosedive Reed just did for me. And then I just ruined it for you. So yes, emails for stickers. What you got, Riri?
Okay, so in a couple of weeks, all right?
Just literally a couple.
Literally just a couple of weeks. We are launching officially the Fear of God Book Club. Book Club! All right, so our first entry.
That was amazing. Because what you don't know is I don't know if you can see this. I sent it to Gallery View right before we did that. And all of a sudden we synchronized our singing. That's beautiful.
These things just happen. They just happen. So we are inaugurating the Fear of God Book Club with a conversation with author Matt Ruff about his novel, Lovecraft Country. We are not, because it hasn't aired yet, we are not going to be touching the HBO series at this point, although maybe, hopefully, sometime in the near future. But we will be having Matt Ruff on to discuss his novels, which means you only have a couple of weeks to support your local library or acquire a copy of it somewhere that you can read it in preparation for that conversation. And if you will share our show or an episode from our show or something about the show and tag us in it, you will automatically be entered into a drawing for an opportunity to win an autographed copy of Matt Ruff's Lovecraft Country, autographed by Matt Ruff. It was, yes, autographed by him, not by us. So that's much more valuable.
Yeah.
So yes,
I
that
mean,
is Fear of God.
I like that. We'll autograph a thing and send it to
Sure.
So emails for stickers, book club, and then please send us your recordings of you, your family, your loved ones, your peers, your enemies, your animal singing, what you're watching, what you're reading, what you're listening to. You got a little taste of that on last week's Leftovers episode with the cutest little Gowdy Canada ever beget. So yeah, send us your what you're watching, reading, listening to. Read, are there any other business we need to tend to?
At the moment, no. We are in the middle of hashtag 2020, but voting has closed, so nothing more, nothing else. So if that's the case, we're gonna put Pandora back in the box with Beetlejuice.
It's showtime.
Indeed it is. All right. So listen, Nathan.
What?
It's been a long time since we've done this. Oh man.
Yeah.
It has. Normally this is the moment because we pivoted out. You can tell that we've had like 5 or 6 weeks of really heavy conversation.
Sad days.
It really has been. And
I'm glad that since last week's episode, the world has just righted itself. Like everything is good again. Like no more overnight. Simmering, long-standing racial anxiety and tension and violence in America. No more global pandemic. He was right. I just shoved some bleach up my butt and it just went away. It's a miracle.
Lots of things. I don't even know how to respond to that.
It's okay. Nobody does. Can you? Is there a way? There's no right way.
Is there a good answer to that question? No, there's not. So anyway, we are both clearly a little punchy from everything that's going on. So this conversation should be a lot of fun. But before we dive into the film we are talking about this week, we have our 2020 countdown. I don't know why I'm singing every.
I wasn't ready for that one, so I'm sorry I couldn't join you.
That's okay. So we've been counting down in 2020. We have been counting down your favorite horror films from every year since 2000. And now, after taking that brief break to cover Leftovers Season 1, and we will get on with Leftovers Season 2 in just a couple of weeks after the conversation with Matt Ruff. But in the meantime, we're here on 2020, and it is time for your top 10 of 2009. Listeners, are you ready?
2009.
Co-host, are you ready? Yeah, isn't that nuts? That's crazy.
That's
2009.
Close. It doesn't feel like that long ago.
2009 was a big year for me. I started the job, as of this recording, I started the job that I am still currently with, and I got married in 2009. 2009 was a big year for me. Yes, I am much more fond of the getting married portion than I am of the job portion, but that just is what it is. So yeah, it's yeah. How about that countdown? You were there.
I was there. I was front and center.
You were my best man.
Yeah.
Okay, so we are going to be counting down.
I keep trying to think of things that happened to me in 2009. Can't.
It was 11 years ago, so it might as well have been another lifetime.
My eldest had just been born.
Hey,
in 2008.
That's not nothing. So nothing happened in 2009.
Yeah, forget it. Nope, nothing. 2009. Do you want to start or do you want me to start?
I'll let you pick. We're going to say... Flashes up on the screen. 15 minutes later, we're sitting there staring at each other.
Do you ever read Mo Willems' pigeon books to your kids? To your kid?
No, I don't know what that is.
Oh, Riri,
Really?
my little librarian. Yes, you need to look into. I'm gonna gift you. Anyway,
All right.
the
Mo
joke's not gonna
Williams
matter. Your
pigeons.
girl, you'll love it. We
Okay.
love pigeon and his stories around here.
Awesome.
Number 10. I'm gonna go. Number 10, directed by Karin Kusama. We covered her film The Invitation, which I did not look up because I didn't know I was going to connect it here because Reed just got me this list 5 minutes ago. This film is Jennifer's Body, starring Megan Fox. I never saw this movie. I can't speak to it.
Yeah. So my only comment on this one is that I have been intending actively to revisit this film because when I saw this, I actively hated this movie, but I remember so little about it that I can't remember why. And in recent
And it's
years,
sometimes good to remind ourselves why we hate things.
well, but here's the thing, though, is a critical, like, there's been a bit of a sort of a conversational resurgence of this film. First of all, Karin Kusama's, increased presence, and of course, I loved The Invitation. I still love that episode. I'm very proud of that episode, and so that sort of pedigree attached to some recent conversations that I've been hearing have been making me want to revisit it just for a fresh assessment because I remember so little about it and I wonder if I would feel the same way about it or not. So I've been meaning to revisit this, but especially it winding up in number 10 of the top 10 favorites of our listeners, it pushes me a little bit towards the edge. So I might have to do that. So number 9 is by, I think it's safe to say he's a Fogg favorite around here. His episodes rank among our highest listened to and some of our most lauded entries. Directed by Bong Joon-ho, it is his film Mother, not to be confused with Darren Aronofsky's Mother from only a few years ago.
Like, Mother. At least if you say it the way it's written.
When you say them together, his is Mother, and Aronofsky's is Mother.
Mother.
That's the one. It's like a bark versus like a squeak.
Sure.
Yeah, something like that.
An overture.
I don't want to say too much. Right. I don't want to say too much about this movie.
I want to watch it.
Yeah, because I know you want to watch it, and so I highly recommend it. I think it's great.
I give the impression it might be about a parental figure of some type.
It is about a parental figure. That is
cool.
That is not a metaphor. But
speaking of
yes.
films that are not about parental figures, is number 8, starring Willem Dafoe, which I've never seen. I just remember its controversy.
Yes.
Antichrist, directed by Lars von Trier, whom the only film I've seen of his is
Dogville. Yes.
And I really struggled with that one.
I've seen quite a few of his films. Ironically,
Did he do
have
Elephant?
No,
No,
that was Gus.
That was the other three name guy.
Yeah, they're all the same piece. I've seen a number of his films. His films are really challenging. He's an interesting filmmaking voice, a pretty controversial filmmaking voice. I have not seen Antichrist as of this recording. I know a little bit about it that lets me know I would need to be. It would not be necessarily a wise viewing option in this present state of mind because I have heard that it is very oppressive, dark, heavy film, and terribly controversial in some of its individual content, some of which I already know. And that does not surprise me with Lars. I don't know if it's von Trier or von Trier. I'm not sure, but
you're usually wrong.
Okay.
On names.
I felt that sentence was going elsewhere. So, but I have seen, I did see Dogville. I saw the follow-up Manderley. I've seen more recently and somewhat more controversial than even Antichrist. I saw The House That Jack Built. So I also saw, and this is probably my favorite of his sort of output, is the miniseries he did called The Kingdom, which was really interesting. Actually, Stephen King kind of wrote and adapted an American version called Kingdom Hospital. But I can't speak to this specific film because I have not seen this specific film. But I was curious when it hit, as I have been with all of these lists, like, oh, should I, visit this finally after all this time? But again, what I know about it, probably need to wait till I'm a little bit more in a positive headspace before I visit this film because I hear it's very.
So you'll
impressive.
never watch it, is what you're saying.
Way things are going. Outlook
Possibly.
looks
Possibly.
low. Yes.
Anyway,
so
next on the list is
which is my turn.
your turn.
So
right. I was like,
you're just queuing me up. You just like
I was.
okay.
Here you
Yeah.
go.
Okay. So next on the list is a film directed by Tommy Wirkola, another film that I have long been meaning to get to because I hear it's a lot of fun, but I haven't seen it, is called Dead Snow. What I hear about, and I know very little of this film, but what I hear is it's basically Nazi zombies in the winter. But I hear it's a horror comedy. And, you know, nothing spells funny like Nazi zombies.
In the winter.
Since you already kicked the door open about
What?
friggin' the victim.
Oh.
So I participated in this and I performed in it and I helped write it and helped, you know, sort of with some of the production aspect of it. We did this weird like motion comic
Oh, I
thing
love that.
called Dick Richard's Private Dick.
See?
Yes. Yeah, you did. Yeah, you
Jinx.
did. That's my, you know, all these little lame claims to fame. I worked on that. He helped us out on one episode, but it is true. I share a credit with Dan Harmon of Rick and Morty and Community fame because he was on, you know, one of our episodes helping us out with it. But also Rob Schraub, who was a really fun, great guy. The reason I'm bringing it up is because our villain were Nazi zombies. So I was just like, oh, okay, that's yeah. So it's still out there somewhere. I don't know. It's a little hard to find at this point, but it's still out there somewhere. If curious, diligent.
I keep wanting to see Dick Richards resurgent.
Well, you know, give it time. All right. Why don't you cue us up with
Number six on the list is Moon. That spells moon. Directed by Duncan Jones and starring Sam Rockwell. This is a great flick.
It's a wonderful movie.
Really
this is so this is the, you know, the first one that I've seen Mother and Jennifer's Body, but this is the first one that I'm like I've seen and I can talk about how great it is. It's a really great concept. It's science fiction. It kind of counts as horror more tangentially, but it's a really fascinating, very, very good movie. If you have not seen Moon, directed by Duncan Jones and starring Sam Rockwell, seek it out. You're in for a treat. It's really good. Go in as blind as you can, like knowing nothing about it, and just go in watching it. It's really, really great.
Take out your contacts.
Yep, those two. Yep.
Next,
like,
number 5.
Wear dark shades.
Yeah.
Okay. Number 5 is a really strange movie. Oh, of course I get number 5 with this name.
Yeah.
So,
good luck.
Yeah, thanks. Okay. Directed by, I'm going to say, Jean Colette Serra.
What you
Maybe
don't know
that's right.
is I just took it to speaker view so that you were center stage when you said that. So that
Thanks, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I don't know how to say that
You
name, and I
did it wrong.
apologize for that. But this is Orphan, directed by that individual who I'm sure is a lovely one. So, or have you seen Orphan? It stars Vera Farmiga, and I believe maybe Sam Rockwell, or I might be thinking of a different film. But Orphan is about a couple that adopts a young girl, and some mayhem ensues. There are some surprises in it that are kind of upsetting and likely not expected, even by people who are sort of prepping themselves for something that's unexpected. But a pretty effective little thriller. I don't love it, but I think it's really interesting and probably worth some time. And it's number 5 on listeners' favorite film, so it's clearly got some fans.
More than halfway there.
Have you seen it?
No, I just said that.
Well, I don't listen to you. I don't know if you
I'm
just
starting to notice that. Number 4 on the list is Triangle, directed by Christopher Smith. I love that you got the director of Orphan, and I got Christopher Smith.
Yeah, I love that.
It's
my
great.
favorite
I love
thing.
it. I haven't seen Triangle either, so.
Okay, now Triangle's awesome. Stars Melissa Gilbert. It's a horror film, but it involves it's got some science fiction elements, specifically some time travel elements that happen sort of it's got some interesting elements about time travel that occur in the same place, because most of the film takes place on this boat. That's as much as I want to say about it, because I would highly recommend listeners who have not seen it seek it out. Again, go in with as little knowledge as possible. It is a really fun, interesting.
So
I didn't spoil anything with that setup. It goes to some wild places.
What's number 3, Reed?
It's great. Number 3 is a film that I adore. I think it's fantastic. It's a very different type of film directed by Ty West called The House of the Devil. It is, I think it's technically considered one of those films that would classify as like a, I don't know though. They call them like mumblecore films, where they're made through a lot of improvisation. Mumblecore, yeah, right.
Yeah.
But I think tonally it kind of would fit in that place, but it's a very deliberately crafted film. Mumblecore films tend to stem from a lot of improvisation and just sort of naturalistic flow of things, with people sort of inventing the story as it goes. This is a very intentionally crafted but very subtle and unexpected little film. It is a film set in the 80s that is not at all like trying to lean on 80s nostalgia. It purely by coincidence takes place in the 80s, but it's not at all like a Stranger Things or something that's kind of leaning in on the 80s vibe. It's a very, very, very affecting film. It's really good. So yeah, I highly recommend Ty West's The House of the Devil, and it's 3rd on the list. So I'm sure listeners have got its fan. You should seek it out if you haven't seen it. It's really, really good.
Nope,
go ahead.
Number 2 on the list is Zombieland, directed by Ruben Fleischer and starring Woody Harrelson and Emma Stone and Bill Murray and Jesse Eisenberg, and I'm missing somebody. Signs.
Yeah, the Signs girl.
Signs. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Come on, you know her name.
But I don't.
Oh.
But no, it is bad. But you know, I'm just as bad as you, because you don't remember either. But no, I mean, we could look it up real quick.
I'm going to, because I feel bad, and
you should do that.
Everyone works for their career.
While you're looking that up, again, apologies. We forget stuff around here. Just listen to Nathan for 5 minutes. You'll figure that out. But so
Abigail Breslin,
that's it. Zombieland was neck and neck for the entirety of this voting with our number 1. Like, it was just a very, very minuscule, fractional close race. And for a while there, I thought Zombieland was going to take it. But Zombieland is really fun. Before we pass off that conversation, because it is a unique and fun, sort of more lighthearted zombie flick, have you seen the sequel, Double Tap?
I've not.
Okay. Double Tap's really a lot of fun. Like, honestly, it's great. I had the advantage of watching them in close proximity with each other. I watched them like literally one day and then the next. And I think the criticism of Double Tap is that it is more of the same of Zombieland. But if you enjoy Zombieland, then, I mean, why would you balk at getting more of the same? It's fun. It's fun. You got good, energetic performances. It's a fun, lighthearted zombie flick, and it does not surprise me at all that it's up at number 2 on the list. Again, had made a strong contender for number 1, but it's not number 1. I can't think of a more appropriate film to top a list in 2020, although this is for 2009, than Sam Raimi's directed Drag Me to Hell, one of the greatest titles ever in horror history. And listeners, that is your number 1 film, and we are about to talk all about it after we take a brief detour as Nathan pulls up the global box office for 2009 and the top 5 biggest box office smashes of 2009. So as I'm looking at this, like, it is interesting. There are some, there are a couple of items that have some science fiction elements to it, particularly Moon and Triangle. But there's a lot of these films that deal with sort of I'm seeing horrific, sort of monstrous things like Antichrist and House of the Devil. I mean, it's a bit of an all over the place list. Although I find everything in pairs. Zombieland and Dead Snow both deal with zombies. Moon and Triangle are both sci-fi horror. House of the Devil and Antichrist both deal with sort of those. I mean, I don't know. I can't speak for Antichrist. I just know its title. But no, it's an interesting little hodgepodge of a list. I find this list curious because I think it is the first one. Maybe not, but I think it's the first one of these that we've encountered that we haven't covered any of these yet. So we're covering Drag Me to Hell today, but we haven't already covered any of these other films.
Interesting observation, Riri.
Oh. So what's our box office tally here?
So 2009. Let's see, is there anything in the top 10 worth mentioning? 2009 is the year that the garbage film X-Men Origins Wolverine released. That's a colon. That's a stinker.
Talk about
Good Lord.
Talk about your colon. Yeah, I'm not a fan of that one. That one's
bub.
That one's not great. No. There's some great Wolverine movies out there, but that one's not.
No, it isn't. Number 5. So we go through the top 5 in the 2020 for the look back of the worldwide box office. Hey, speaking of worldwide box office, did you see AMC just released a headline today that we're not going to survive? Dude,
I know.
We lightly joked with Blake on Pontypool that, making it through the year, but we might not.
No, I don't. No, that's crazy. That's just nuts to me.
Is Endgame it?
I mean, right? I mean, in terms of like box office, now I am curious. I haven't heard how other movie cinema franchises like Regal or Cinemark, I haven't heard how they're doing. I know AMC is just a titan in the industry.
Right.
And so the fact that they've been bleeding billions of dollars in cash these past couple of months for not being able to be open and get some revenue stream. And it's fascinating.
Weird times. We don't often dial in on just the industry side of things, but it is a valuable conversation considering the moment we're in. Tenet was being looked at as kind of the tent pole to sort of reopen, which is an enormous amount of pressure to put on a single film. But that was scheduled for mid-July. That is not going to happen. It's not going to happen.
No, I don't think it
And you've got the sort of little foofara that happened between Universal and the movie chains when they did Trolls direct to video.
Yeah.
I mean, the movie chain said, we're not going to show Universal stuff.
I know. Which
it's just wild. I'm sorry to cut you off. It's wild the groundwork that inadvertently got laid for streaming platforms that it's like, are we going to have movie theaters?
I know. And
question.
Yeah, and I certainly hope so, but we shall see, honestly, because good. No, you go ahead.
No, I thought about you recently and I meant to text you this. So this is what's about to happen. You paint this big picture. So Netflix just bought a theater in LA.
Yes. And I saw that.
You and I had a conversation about within the last 18 months to 2 years about Netflix's rise and all this sort of stuff and how the next step would only be if they had brick and mortar theaters.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Dude, Netflix being the juggernaut it is, I can see a world where these chains start going out and they start snapping up these theaters.
No, it wouldn't surprise me at all.
I can see that happening.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all. And my one last comment on the whole AMC thing is I can remember I worked at the Virgin Megastore when you and I moved out to California first. And I remember when the sort of the digital music came and you were the prophet in that scenario because you were like, digital music is like the wave of the future. Like digital is where it's at. And me working at the time for a brick and mortar music store was like, no, man, like CDs are always going to be around and whatever. I mean, like I said some stupid things clearly, but it was interesting because I can remember when we worked for it was Universal that first said they were gonna release day and date. They were going to release their music digitally at the same time it was released to CD. And I remember the response from the Virgin Megastore at that time was to basically comparable to what AMC and some of the other theaters,
Right.
like, we're not going to highlight your product then. If you're going to do
Right.
that, then we're going to bury your product in the back. Universal kind of shrugged and was like, okay, fine. Like, because we see
Right.
the market value in doing this. And so when I heard AMC's statement, there was this little pang of like, oh, AMC, that is not a smart position. Do not play hardball on this.
Because have you shopped at that Virgin Megastore lately?
No.
And
and
why?
that's the thing, because they left the States.
Right.
I do think they have a very small presence back in Europe where they were born, but they are not in the United States anymore. They went, kind of down over time.
You know what's hilarious, Reed, for my scrubbed brain of a memory?
Mm.
I don't remember many things. I remember sitting across from you at the Mexican restaurant in Columbus, Georgia, and you saying, this digital music thing, it's not going to stick. And I'm like, I think it's here. I think it's not going away.
I think
What?
I think it's very clear then that you remember the times when you've proved me wrong. I think.
Well,
I
in
think,
the moment, I didn't know I was proving you wrong. I just sort of surmised. If I remember the times I proved you wrong, I clearly wouldn't remember anything else.
Wow.
Number 5 on the all right, number 5 on the top 5 worldwide box office for 2009. 2012? Crap is this?
Are you looking at the wrong year, or is this no?
No.
I know it's a disaster film. It's a yes, because
is that
no, I remember there was so much hullabaloo. Like, can you remember 8 years ago when hullabaloo? 8 years ago, remember when the Mayan calendar ends in 2012 and everybody's like, oh, so that's going to be the end of the world. And here we are at 2020, like, oh, no. I would give anything to go back and argue about the prophecies.
Y2K, bring it to me.
It's so
Let's do that again.
Can we have the Y2K problems back, please? I'm so tired of 2020's problems. Can we have Y2K back? Oh, Lord.
So 2012, forgettable. Number 6 on the list is Up. Like, Up didn't outrank 2012. All right, so 2012 at number 5. Number 4, let's skip it. Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen. Whatever.
I love how you kind of tried to belch through saying that.
Revenge of the Fallen.
Oh my
Number
God.
3, Ice Age: Dawn of the Dinosaurs. Number two. I mean, number 2 is Half-Blood Prince, which is like the
now
films.
But I like that film. I mean,
not a good film.
look,
I love the series. I love the franchise. It's not a well-constructed film.
Even the weakest Harry Potter is still better than some of what's out there in terms of like franchise properties. They are like, I'm not going to deny that Half-Blood Prince, the Horrible is kind of lower in terms of like the power and impact of that franchise, but there's still some really great things about it. Like, we recently went through the entire Harry Potter series of films as a family, and there's a lot of things that I really appreciate about that. Namely, I feel like performance-wise, you start to get some game step up from even actors who are consistently great, like Alan Rickman. Like, he begins to layer on lots of different things to his performance in that film. And I think structure-wise, I would probably agree with some of your critiques of that adaptation, but I still think stylistically and performance-wise, there's some really great things in there.
You don't have to sell me on liking the Half-Blood Prince, Reed.
No, I feel like I do.
You don't. It's just plot-wise, the film plot-wise is nonsensical. If you try to make sense of it from the book, it doesn't work.
Okay.
Number 1
conversation for another time. Let's do a B-sides.
Is it
where
now?
Nathan and Reed argue about
Half-Blood Prince. It's like, we're not doing a Harry Potter book. We're not doing the series. We're not starting at the beginning. Jumping in at number 6. The last one on the list, or number 1, is just Avatar.
Oh, Avatar came out in 2009.
Yeah.
And here we are 11 years later, still waiting for the sequel that they said was coming in like 2013 and 14. And
you better believe James Cameron's like, what? I need a Cineplex.
Yeah,
I spent like $5 billion making 3 movies that are never going to release, but I need somewhere to put them when they do.
I just pictured, because that's the thing is I read some headline not that long ago where it said James Cameron is intentionally like self-quarantining for 2 weeks so that he can get back to
Down
work.
at the bottom of the ocean. He's like, what? He just hopped in his submersible.
He has a submersible.
He went down with the Navi.
Oh my gosh.
He
Oh.
plugged in. What's astonishing, Reed, is now you gotta account for the novelty of 3D, but Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince worldwide made $933 million.
That's a lot.
The next film up almost tripled that.
Yeah, of course.
No, it did triple that because it was 2.7 billion. So
yes, yeah.
Triple.
I mean,
that's insane.
It's
told
still,
you Half-Blood Prince isn't good.
Well, it still astonishes me that Avatar, and yes, the novelty of 3D is the thing, but it still astonishes me that it made as much as it did, because I'm just like, I mean, like, and
Have
admittedly,
you ever rewatched it? I haven't.
Well, no, and I was even tempted the other day because it's made it to Disney Plus, which we have,
right?
And so I was like, I mean, maybe, but it's just I remember enough about it to remember how ambivalent I was to it. That makes me feel like, I don't know.
Does Disneyland have the Avatar stuff?
No, it's World. Yeah, in Florida.
Well, I know I've been there.
Okay. No, land has nothing.
What's insane
relative to Avatar.
I remember when Disney was planning the Avatar zone as part of Animal Kingdom at Disney World. I was like, why? And this is what's lame about being a Disney fan and a dad and stuff and a movie fan is like the Avatar ride. I think it's called Flight of the Na'vi. It's one of the finest pieces of live amusement ever. It is astonishing. Awesome. My entire family loved this ride, and all I could think was like, damn it, what? Avatar? I don't like this as much as I do. What?
I'm just,
and now they see it on Disney Plus and they're like, oh, can we watch it? I'm like, that's 3 hours. I don't want to watch it.
I'm not gonna say his name because I don't know if he'd appreciate it. But
Sam Worthington.
No.
I'm just Avatar.
My wife and I are close family friends with one of the Imagineers who designed the Avatar ride, and he worked on the Indiana Jones.
Don't you just know at this point? I just assume you know everybody because
it's a little true.
You're lucky the listicle.
He is a super sweet guy. He's a very big Star Trek fan like I am, and I would go over to his house frequently and we would watch Star Trek films and Star Trek episodes together. But yes, he helped design. He was on the design team for the Indiana Jones ride, and he was also on the design team for the Avatar ride. So I have not had the privilege or pleasure of seeing very much from the ride. So it delights my heart to know that that was the experience you had of going on it. Because I hear it's great. Yeah. I hear it's great.
I would like to go to Disney World right now.
Oh God, please.
I need a happy place.
Yeah, please.
All right.
So that was 2020 for 2009. And the favorite film of the year we're about to dive into right now. Here's the thing, man. I'm gonna lay my cards on the table.
Do you ever not?
Well, let me think about that. I love this movie. I love Drag Me to Hell. I love it. I am going to heap a mountain of nonsensical praise on it. I am curious.
I'll be a good foil for you.
I know, that's the thing. Because, shout out and pour a cold one out for our weekend where we got together with some of our friends, our Quarterly King friends, where On Writing was produced. That weekend, we watched a lot of Sam Raimi because we watched the entire Evil Dead trilogy, or not the entire one. I think we just watched Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness, but we also watched Drag Me to Hell. And I know coming out of that you were a bit ambivalent towards it.
But correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't we watch Drag Me to Hell first? I think we did.
I can't remember the sequencing. You could be right.
Because I was like, what am I watching? Because I didn't have the Raimi sensibility yet.
That's right. That's right.
I was like,
you're right. No, you're right. And so I was very curious how you would receive it this time around, knowing your sort of ambivalence to it. I'm not going to hold back on my affection and praise for it, but I don't want you to hold back either on like your sort of sensibility or intake of it. Don't be bullied by my affection for it. Speak exactly how you felt about this film when you rewatched it again.
I'm not afraid anymore. Okay. Well, I wasn't planning to be bullied, but now you got me worried. I mean, what do you want to say? What?
What'd you think of it?
Oh,
What'd you think of it when you watched it?
This time or the first time or both times or?
Hey, this you permission to speak freely. You just say whatever's on your mind.
That's a Star Trek reference that I understood. Halfway through it last night, I was like, oh, what is this?
What is this?
I mean,
I don't know what this is.
I'm living the title of this movie. I feel like I'm just getting dragged deeper in. And
oh my gosh.
No, here's the thing. Like, and I don't know that I want to lead with this, though. Maybe we can, because it's not particular specific to the film, but it's interesting. I have this respect for Raimi, the craftsman.
Mm-hmm.
It took me a bit to comprehend. So you have to remember, my Raimi, my initial Raimi experience was Spider-Man. Period.
Ah, sure. Yeah.
And that's not a great bellwether for what he does. It's got sensibilities about it, but it's still a pretty straight kind of superhero story.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So when Spider-Man 1 and 2 are my basis, now having consumed more Raimi at this point, it makes Spider-Man dance sequence make a whole lot more sense. But when those films, I had seen nothing of his before those. So I saw all those, and then it was for us that I watched Evil Dead first.
Oh, right.
Then a year ago, watching Drag Me to Hell, Evil Dead 2, and Army of Darkness all at once.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was just unprepared for what I've come to refer to as just the Looney Tunes sensibility of what he kind of does, which is totally fine. I'm not positing this as a debate point, though I am curious to hear your thoughts, because last night when I was watching it, I was like, why is this just not clicking for me?
Okay.
And I think in this case, part of it is the performer, is Alison Lohman.
Really?
And hear me, I'm not even criticizing her performance. I'm saying what helped me start to gain footing for Raimi's style was his muse of Bruce Campbell. Like watching Ash versus Evil Dead, which, you can kind of backlay the Ash versus Evil Dead sort of vibe onto the Evil Dead series.
Sure.
Campbell knows what he's in.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I don't know if she does.
Interesting. Okay.
Or that I don't know what I'm watching. That's the discrepancy, is like watching Drag Me to Hell. The first time was jarring because I was like, what is this? Like, I don't get it. This is like it felt like a straight story that all of a sudden just wackadoo, silly, zany, absurd level stuff is happening. Sure, I was like, what? I can't tell how I'm supposed to understand this. Which, again, first time I saw Drag Me to Hell was before the rest of the Evil Deads and Ash vs. Evil Dead. So rewatching it this time with a new sort of comprehension of its conventions, I was like, okay, now why is this not kind of clicking with me? And I don't know if, and I'm saying this sincerely, I don't know if I'm just not getting it. I don't know. And that's what I was interrogating watching it this time through. Because hear me, it wasn't like House of a Thousand Corpses. House of a Thousand Corpses, by the end, I'm like, this is painful. Like, this is painful. Like, I will turn this off.
Yeah, sure.
It wasn't that feeling. It was simply like, I respect the artist, and sure, the world where you could just say, well, it's just not for me. I'm not ready for that yet either. I mean, the
Yeah,
guy's
sure. Yeah,
directing Doctor Strange 2. Come on,
he
bring it to
is.
me, Sam.
He is. Yeah. Get
So
ready
I'm
for more
excited for that.
zany. Sure. Yeah.
So I guess all that's all I could sort of suss out was, if, and it's possible, it's just I don't get it, or it's not for me. I don't know that I'm there yet. So if it's not that, all I could figure out was the actor is acting like she's in a straight story, versus, again, the Bruce Campbell comparison, which is unfair. I know it's unfair, but Campbell, whether at the outset of his work in Evil Dead or not, ultimately knew what he was in, and played to the rafters in his performance,
Yeah.
whereas this just doesn't feel that way. Does that make any sense?
It actually makes a lot of
completely
sense.
off base?
No, it actually makes a lot of sense. So I think Alison Lohman is a really strong performer, but I know, that she is not a horror fan. In fact, when she got cast in this film, she tried to give herself a bit of a quick education on horror, to try to bring her up to speed, and watched films like, according to a couple of interviews, watched films like The Shining or whatever. If you are entering into a Sam Raimi film and your sort of fundamental bases are more direct, sort of epic. Like, you can't enter into Raimi's sensibilities coming from Kubrick. Like, they're
Sure,
just
right.
they're completely different.
And
So
to be clear, real quick, I'm sorry, I'm
Yeah,
actually not criticizing her as a performer.
no, I get it.
want
Yeah,
that
no, I get it.
clear.
No,
So,
because that's the thing is, I feel like maybe there's something to the fact that she was playing it much more straight, whereas Bruce Campbell, in the midst of those films, like you're right, he is not under any illusions about the type of material he's in, and I think that is something that might cause it to connect. Although I feel like for me, it doesn't quite bother me. She acts as a bit of an anchor to all of the rest of the zaniness, and maybe that's just a calibration thing that because that's my experience of it. Is she is like this very sort of direct character, and again, I keep coming back to that word anchor, and that sort of helps me to absorb some of the ridiculousness that's going on around her, because she's a bit more of a metronome.
well, here's a comp that just came to mind. Again, it sounds like I'm saying, Saloma's not a good actor. That's not what I'm saying. But think about Samara Weaving in this movie. Think about the Ready or
man.
Not Grace, right? She
God.
knows what she's in,
Yeah.
and she's
Sarah
in
Weaving.
on the joke.
She's so great in this film. Oh my God. I mean,
Right.
like Alice.
Think about, because
yeah.
what clicked with me the most was the scene, is the blood eruption on her boss. I'm like, I know we're not playing this straight, but this
Sure. Yeah, of course.
performer is still acting like she's in a standard thing.
Sure. No, I
is
get
all I'm
it.
trying to say. And so Samara Weaving just popped in my head. I was like, oh, she would have killed in this film.
Oh my gosh, Samara Weaving would be so great in a film like this. But I mean, like, yeah, I hear what you're saying, and again, I think both of us would say we don't want to take anything away from Alison Lohman as a performer, because I do think she's, she does a really good job. But I can kind of get on board with, maybe there's a disconnect in terms of the exact, is she on the wavelength of what she's in, and that's a fair question. I think for me, this is the type of film, and horror can provide a lot of different contexts of things. I think what Sam Raimi does really well, which, by the way, one film that I don't know if you've ever seen or not. Have you ever seen A Simple Plan starring Bill Paxton, Billy Bob Thornton?
No.
Okay.
It's direct, right? It's straight.
It is no zaniness whatsoever.
Right.
And it's his best film, like unqualified. Like, that's his strongest film. It is outstanding. That film is amazing. And it's very direct, no outrageousness to it whatsoever. It's a powerful film. I would go watch it right now. But I think the thing that he does, and that Sam Raimi brings to the table with some of this zaniness is, I mean, you think about a film like this, and horror, and this is part of why we do this show, horror provides some context through which you can explore things in a bit of a different environment or a bit of a different context, and it provides some metaphors that you can play around with. You get into your Hereditaries or your Midsommars or your kind of more intellectual highbrow horror, what they call elevated horror, which I don't know if I like that term, but you get into those kind of films, and horror can provide an opportunity to sort of really get into the nitty gritty of certain things. But every once in a while, I love just an outlandish, absurd, take everything to its extremes kind of story. Like you're starting right out the gate with the title, like Drag Me to Hell. This is
Sure.
this,
Yeah.
this is you're on its face is a ridiculous, absurd sort of extremity. And then I was really paying attention. I do have a few trivial bits, but let's just have the conversation we're having. Right on its face, I'm seeing like, man, this girl is up against so much unfairness. Like, first
Sure.
of all, she's got the D-bag coworker who's vying for her promotion at the same time. You've got her just outrageously, just sort of dismissive and passive aggressive boss. She's dating a genuinely good guy who loves her, but his parents are so elitist in everything.
And that three-piece suit doesn't fit. He looks like a child.
That's so funny.
Wearing his dad's suit to work.
Thanks, Dad. So but there's just so many things up against her. And again, I'm going to heap a lot of affection on this film. I love the sort of absurdity, the sort of absurdity of the premise that she also is a kind of basically good person who has a really good heart, and she has this one moment against a character who is, by their very initial description, is off-putting, their visual sort of presentation, that Mrs. Ganush is like an off-putting, a bit unsettling, kind of gross character. And and this woman, who again is fundamentally good, makes this like one decision. And even still, like even in the moment when she supposedly shames Miss Ganush, she's just sort of wanting her to back off. She's not even trying to like humiliate her. She just wants her to back off. So it's like this one moment of weakness, and then suddenly for that one single thing, and this will probably come up when we discuss themes again, that one single thing, she just gets put through the absolute ringer, culminating in, spoiler alert if you haven't seen the film, I mean, the film is called Drag Me to Hell, and in that's what the film leaves you with, is this basically good person having gone through all of these efforts only to get dragged down to hell. That's when, and there is something, I say this sincerely, there is something pretty cathartic about the ridiculousness of that. There's something a bit, it sounds too lofty a word to say cleansing. Cathartic is probably the better word, to just sort of enter into this notion of the absurd extremity of all of these bad, evil, wicked things that are going to come and pounce on you. And I appreciate that about this film. I don't even know how high-minded Raimi and team wanted to be in setting out to make it. I think they really just wanted to sort of dance around in the sandbox of ridiculousness. And
which again is totally fine. But rewind a year of my life, which feels like 20, and I'm hanging out with buddies new and old who are all horror fans.
Yes,
and pretty much had all seen this. The only Raimi I'm familiar with that I've seen was Spider-Man, and we had done Evil Dead by then.
Yeah, we had. Yeah.
But even Evil Dead 1 is its own beast. But so all I know is the title and the cover. And I'm like, these dudes are digging this flick. Okay, man, I am gonna show up and be part of the team.
What's wrong with me?
And no. I'm saying before we even started, I was thinking, I'm not naming the movie, but using the adjective, I was thinking like sinister, like this is gonna be dark and effed up, and like drag me to hell, and there's a chick on the front being dragged literally into hell. This is gonna be so grimy. And then I'm like, what is this? It was a no, thank you.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
Um,
Anyway, so I
We're-
am not going to be combative towards your affection for it.
sure.
You know.
So
I
a
will
little-
say Ganesh was not following any CDC guidelines at
none.
all. Like,
None.
I will say this. We talked last week in the leftovers about we can't go back to normal. What we need is new. Like, I can't handle in movies anymore. I'm like, y'all need to wash your hands. Like, you are too close. That lady gumming on your face, y'all dead. You did. You
Gums her
gone
face.
so many times. WTF,
Like
man.
4
Like,
times.
it's just like a pastime that
Oh
she
my
does
gosh.
at this
Yes.
point.
Oh, let me gum on your face a little bit. So gross. All right, let me get the trivial bits out of the way because there's not that many.
Please.
So I don't know if you were paying attention, but the good old ash yellow Delta 88 makes an appearance. That's
Really?
that's Miss Ganush's car.
Yeah.
Yes, and so I love that. Raimi actually wanted Bruce Campbell to make a cameo, but Bruce Campbell was on the TV series Burn Notice and couldn't work out the scheduling for it. I did write down that the Drag Me to Hell concept is actually a combination of sort of an ancient mythological legend and the Krampus legend, where there's someone sort of torments a wrongdoer and sort of drags them into the afterlife because of some transgressions that they had. I don't know if you noticed that this was because if you watch the same version I did, you watch the unrated cut. The rated cut is PG-13. The regular theatrical cut is only PG-13. Even as bananas as this film gets,
Do you know specifics of what's different?
I think the unrated cut, which I believe is the version you and I both watched, is just more gory and bloodier in a couple of key scenes. I think the main thing they had to
one more gumming scene.
Right. When she has the nosebleed, which is really like a nose gush, inside the office building, I think that's much shorter in the theatrical
Please
cut.
never say the phrase nose gush again. That ain't right.
Yeah, that ain't right. Oh, there's a that ain't right list coming up that I'll have to let know. Sam Raimi was busy on Spider-Man and wanted Edgar Wright to direct this because he had written this script before he began work on Spider-Man.
Spider-Man 3? Concurrent to that?
No, it's pre Spider-Man 1. He wrote this script before he ever got involved in the Spider-Man franchise and was going to direct it. But then when he was so involved with, Spider-Man 1 and 2 and 3, he wanted the film to come to fruition. So he invited Edgar Wright to direct it, but Edgar Wright was working on Hot Fuzz at the time and also said he didn't think he was the right fit for the material. So then after Spider-Man 3, and there's a lot of conversation around Sam Raimi just sort of being disenfranchised a bit with the way Spider-Man 3 went and all that kind of stuff. So he wanted like a palate cleanser, kind of get back to his roots and everything.
A nose gush.
A nose gush, yeah. So my last little bit is that it is frequently compared to a much more direct and straightforward horror film from 1957 called Curse of the Demon, which is a film I've seen and I love. There's a lot of sort of subtle differences between the plots, but sort of the fundamental overall plot is the same. Particularly like the climactic scenes take place at a train station. The demons look similar in terms of the horned sort of figure, and there's a cursed object that gets passed, and you have like a finite amount of time before this demon is going to come and like claim you and all that kind of stuff. So that ends my trivial bit session. Unless you have any for this film, then we can move on. So my first on likes is the film just throws down right away in the first 5 minutes when it literally drags a child to hell. like the kind of tone that you're in for when that is your opening salvo. And I had mentioned before that the film front loads a lot of just unfair dynamics against Christine's character because the sleazy guy at the bank, her boss, the elitism of her parents, the push from her boss to make the tough decisions. There's just a lot kind of coming up against her that steps into that.
You need to just take him to HR.
No kidding. And so what I do find interesting that we can maybe get into more when we get to the theme portion is I do think there's something to the fact that it is this one moment in the film that she decides to, have this sort of selfish ambition against her own initial
Sure.
desires. She wants to do something for Miss Ganush. She is compassionate by nature, and so she wants to do something, but she's also trying to get this assistant manager's position. And then the guy's totally the boss totally sets her up with like, it's a tough decision. It's your call.
See, it's really
know?
just an indictment of capitalism.
I mean,
and
take
hierarchical, transactional, like
Yeah.
tit for tat. Like,
whatever gets you on the wavelength of this film, I am all
I'm trying.
for.
Yeah, she's just trying to make it in the world. Like, boyfriend's mama don't like her. Miss Ganesh is just like belching and blorching all over. Now, you will appreciate this. I'm like, you know what? I don't know how I feel about this movie, but I recognize signature Raimi stuff. Inanimate objects coming to life.
Yes.
The wind and the leaves rustling, the low camera
Absolutely.
angles.
Absolutely.
The dancing deadites.
Look at you. Look at you. That goat face in that seance scene is so Sam Raimi. That is absolutely, that is like, that's a deadite right there. That's what that goat is. That goat is a deadite.
Sure.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So what else do I have in my likes dislike scene? So I did
love.
Go ahead.
Stop.
No.
I'm trying to give a compliment here.
Yeah. Please.
It's a single frame of the entire film. I loved the imagery of the shadow Lamia climbing the stairs to her room.
That's your like. That's what you wrote down.
That's what I wrote. I wrote down a bunch of them.
Yeah. I love the ending of this film. I don't want the ending of this film to be any different. Like, I feel like this is the perfect way to end this absurd.
Like, there's a crap ton of stuff that happens. What are you referring to specifically?
I'm referring to the fact that she goes through all of this stuff.
She goes to hell. You like it when people go to hell? Is that what we're after? Reed? Is that what we're discovering? Is like Reed's like, man, I love redemptive violence.
This is
wow. I want people who make a mistake once to have eternity's wrath heaped upon them.
There would, in a film like this, there would be no catharsis, no real catharsis, if she's put upon and oppressed and all of those things go, she goes through all of this torment and then manages to just like shove the problem down the throat of the person that she evicted to begin with. Like, there would be no catharsis.
I remembered that she'd given the button to the little guy,
Yes.
But I'd forgotten that it was her that get pulled down. I thought in my memory it was, oh, that's right. Oh, the big thing is she gave him the button and he's gonna get drugged.
Oh, right.
Drugged to heck.
To me, it's like in the same way that like Little Shop of Horrors, the original ending of Little Shop of Horrors, in the same way that like you like Seymour, you like Audrey, but Seymour through the course of that film decides to, actively kill people and feed them to Audrey too.
Sure.
And there's a version where you could say he doesn't get his proper comeuppance because you are okay with it because you like him so much. And in this sort of context, like, I feel like you don't have it's a diluted catharsis and ultimately a failed catharsis if she does not actually get dragged to hell in the end of the film, because the whole piece is absurd. The whole thing is absurd. We have some scares that we can get to, but let me sort of lean in on where I'm going with theme here, and we can pivot back into scares and then sort of unpack more of this later. Like, a major element that I love about this film is it takes some legitimate concerns that you would talk about in therapy and blows them up to ridiculous proportions, which makes them feel ridiculous by nature. I have wrestled, probably for reasons of my upbringing and for reasons of my own psychology, I wrestle a lot with this sort of paradigm that when bad things happen, they must be rooted in those singular times that I made a bad choice.
Sure.
And we talked in Under the Shadow about the ways you can personalize tragedy and the ways that you can say, like, okay, well, all of these big things are happening, but it's happening because I made this choice and this choice, and because these finite, very small choices that I made hinge on, and listen, there are some people who I feel like still sort of operate theologically in this spectrum where they think that mountains and mountains of good can be undone by fractional sort of compromised decisions. And I think there's
Sure.
a real conversation that you could have about the ways in which small decisions, like in the creation narrative, eating the fruit, brings down wrath and sin upon all of creation and all of that. And I do find, I feel like me thinking that disaster has come upon me because of a couple of bad choices is a very narcissistic perspective. I think for me to believe that I hold that much power in the world is incredibly narcissistic of me. And yet, sometimes I
It's a breakthrough.
still wrestle with the complexity of that perspective. And a film as absurd as it is, like Drag Me to Hell, where is like, oh, she's good. She's a good person. She's got a good heart. She even confesses at the end that she had done the wrong thing because she could have helped her and chose not to help her. So she does all of the right things. And I feel like that's the catharsis that a film like this can offer, is it shows how ridiculous it is to feel like you are the harbinger of all of these awful things, as if that you hold that much power in sort of your negative compromised choices to bring down literally the wrath of the demons of hell to hinge on these minuscule little choices. And like I said, there's an other side of that conversation that talks about the way a moment of compromise can undermine a great deal of good. But that's a big thing that I appreciate about this film, is that sort of absurdist explosion,
Yeah. I mean, I like what you're extrapolating. I think your interpretation is a lot stronger than I've seen it twice. Which isn't me saying I'm an expert now. I'm saying in the two viewings, what you just identified was much more articulated than I feel like the film does. To me, I actually was wondering, like, man, she is a turd towards this woman. The woman's a wreck. I'm not arguing. Ganesh
sure.
is
Yeah,
not.
of course. Yeah, of course.
Just jacked up. But I guess what I'm saying is, except for that moment that you're referring to at the end of kind of momentary confession, generally speaking, I don't think the character owns much complicity in the wrongdoing. Or maybe you're saying that's the point. There is no.
I do think that's part of the point. So
What?
Okay, so that she is all about avoiding the consequence of it, and admittedly, the punishment does not fit the crime for this particular sort of dynamic, but she's all about avoiding the consequence of that has been sort of pushed upon her. She's been cursed with this thing, has basically 3 days to fix it somehow, or she is literally going to be doomed for all eternity and tormented for all eternity. And it is that moment of lucidity at the end where she feels it's very important, but she feels it's very important now that she's out of the thick of the consequences. And so she feels that she's sort of put the whole thing to bed. And that's the moment that she's like, okay, I'm never going to do anything like that again. Like, I'm never, now that I've avoided consequence, I'm never going to sort of make that compromised decision again. I could have helped and I didn't help. And that was, wrong of me. That was a big problem. And I do feel like, again, maybe I am bringing some things to the film, but I'm using film text to extrapolate everything that I'm bringing. I'm not, I feel like whether Sam Raimi realized it or not, I did read somewhere that they were intentionally trying to structure it as a classical morality play, albeit to absurd conclusions. But I do think that's part of what this film has to offer, is there's a sense that you can enter into this of like, I'm just trying to get this right, everybody. I'm just trying to do good. And, there's the piece of it to say like, hey, okay, don't compromise even for a moment, because literally you'll open Pandora's box. And that is I keep referencing that is a pretty old concept of Pandora. In that myth was, just a curious individual. She makes like that one wrong choice and unleashes monstrous things onto the world. And I feel like that is something, at least psychologically, that we need to probably enter into a little bit and just sort of look at how I keep coming. I've referenced it before. I keep coming back to that line from No Country for Old Men, where Tommy Lee Jones's friend looks at him and says, like, you can't stop what's coming. Like, it's not all just waiting on you. And I think there's a tremendous amount of value in exploring our own vanity in the power that our choices have, because I do feel like you can minimize your choices and diminish them to where you do not give the choices you make the proper gravity and how they can affect other people. I think the reverse of that is also harmful, where you feel like you turn the world on its axis with your choices, and that
right.
you know, the singular thing you do brings about all of this sort of evil and wickedness, and you know, and I feel like both of those perspectives are far too in the extreme to really be helpful or mature. But that's so often where we find ourselves, in one of those places or another. Either my choices don't matter, or my choices are all that matters. And I feel like there's better conversation to be had. So anyway, that's what I'm dancing around.
I mean,
with
I don't want you to feel self-conscious, because I think that I'm trying to mentally take the things you're laying out and overlay them onto my experience of the film and be like, why is this so asynchronous for me?
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of can't get away from just feeling like, you know, kind of what I said earlier, that, and maybe I'm not going to go through the work of watching it a third time just to answer this question for myself, but like, you know, did I just miss some of the text of her character because I didn't get the impression? It felt like the bulk of the film, she's just avoiding consequence for an action she kind of doesn't consider that bad an action.
Agreed. No, I don't disagree with
And
that. Yeah.
I don't know exactly what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
But
what?
no. Let's, because I want to explore that a little bit more. So we can either, you know, dive into that right now, or we can rattle off the that ain't right list and then dive back into that a little bit, because I think that pivots some of the that ain't right. The that ain't right stuff, I think, kind of fuels a little bit more of what I'm saying. So maybe we pivot over there for a moment before we dive back in, and then head to winding down. What's on your list of scares or absurdity? The face.
All of it, man. I mean, come on, you know, like, dude, like coughing up that nasty junk, and then like those moments where you want to like tip your hat to the Foley artist and be like, y'all know what you are doing with this squishy, squirchy sound. Yes. When she's just pawing her handkerchief and it's just bluck. That ain't, oh, come on, man.
Oh, yeah.
That ain't right.
Yeah.
Stop. Yeah.
Now you know how that feels.
That's different. That's funny. That's nasty. I will say this: one of my favorite shots of the film is Miss Ganesh in the back seat when she's in shadow.
Yeah. It's great.
That's a really great shot. And you know that it's just the whole car stuff conflict. I'm like, what?
Gumming her to death. Oh my
God.
Good
Lord, what am I?
So awful. She staples her head and just like, oh my gosh,
3 years too long. I'm done. I'm just kidding. Yeah. Only Sam Raimi can make a stapler work in that moment.
Yep. Dude, that fly going up her nose when she's asleep. No, that ain't right. No. That ain't right.
Made me think of Mommy Dearest. Mommy Dearest, I did it again. Good night, Mommy.
You did. Good night, Mommy.
Good night, Mommy. It's late.
Good night, Mommy.
Not Mommy Dearest. Good night, Mommy. Made me think of that. I'm like, boo.
Oh my God, that old lady in the dream threw up maggots and worms all over that woman's face. Like,
there is way too much expulsion and regurgitation happening in this movie. Like, nose gush.
Drag me to the bathroom. Expulsion and regurgitation.
Drag me to the remote. That lady gumming her face. That's like Poop Club got reset 2 weeks ago. Old lady with no teeth gumming your face while bodily syllabic fluid, or just seeps and oozes out, like in the new world where germs are everywhere and will kill you. That is a new reset for That Ain't Right.
God.
I'm like, I went and washed my hands after that scene. I'm like, I am so nastified.
Where's a bag lady for me to barf on?
Oh my God. Ugh.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that ain't right. That character just spews bile all over her face, like as she just sit there. Oh my God, it's so gross. It's so gross. Yeah, that's next level. That ain't right. That is next level. That ain't right. And I think that's the thing. So I'm not even disagreeing with you about like maybe Alison Lohman is playing it a bit too straight when she's in a film this zany and absurd. But I think it is the absurdity of it all that really helps me to sort of feel the ridiculousness of some of the things that I get very, very pent up about. Like, I'm frequently, I don't know, I'm frequently sort of crippled is a bit too dramatic a word of it, but at least hindered is probably a better word. I'm frequently hindered by this self-obsession of always threading the needle of the exact right decision and saying the exact right thing and doing the exact right moment. And it's not even just the moments of, I don't have very many moments of willful, like I'm doing something I know is not a good choice. That actually happens, incredibly rarely. Most often it's the things that are just, I didn't realize that was going to be a bad idea. I didn't realize that was not going to be, and it's rooted in selfishness, and it's rooted in neglect of certain things that I should be more attentive to. It's far less willful for me, but no less my responsibility. For instance, if I'm just focused on myself and sort of, sleepwalking through my days and not giving the attentive presence that my family deserves of me, that's not necessarily something I would say is an active, willful transgression on my part, but it's definitely something that's my fault, and it could bring about bad things in my world and in my family and in my life if I don't attend to those kind of things. But I have, and again, maybe listeners will hear something like this and think Reed needs therapy. Maybe they'll hear something like this and
that's what
think,
I'm here for, Reed.
I appreciate that. Maybe they'll hear something like this and they can relate. But I think there is this way in which you can feel profoundly guilty or profoundly oppressed by these momentary decisions. And I think in a lot of ways, we feel like either we have no power in the situation or that we have far too much. And I feel like a film like this allows me, maybe not everybody, but it allows me to enter into the absurdity of thinking like, oh yeah, because I'll tell you, like, there are things going on, and I had this conversation, and then I might be done sort of encompassing my thoughts on this film. I had a conversation with someone, it's actually an employee of mine, and they were really stressed out about work. And they called me and they said, I just need to talk to you, like, yes, you're my boss, but I need to talk to you like just person to person as a friend. And they were talking about different things. And they were feeling overwhelmed and they were feeling really stressed out. And one of the things that I said to them is I said, hey, in the process of doing your best work, I need you to remove the feeling that your job holds ultimate power over you. And I need you to remove the feeling that failing at something here is going to be the ultimate end to everything, because you're not going to think straight about the choices you need to make on the job if you're constantly afraid that one bad choice is just going to bring the house of cards down. And so I tried in my effort, and presumably it helped a little bit, tried in my effort to say, like, you first of all need to take all the pressure off of these choices you're making. You need to try to make the best right choice you can, but take all of the pressure off. And something like a film like this is like, oh my gosh, I can't make that one wrong decision or else I'm gonna get dragged to hell, and that's the thing that it kind of makes that feeling absurd.
I love thematically what you're putting down. I do.
Yeah.
And that's not me pacifying you. I genuinely like that. And as I'm sort of re-imaging it, yeah, I think it's either, and I'm okay if it is this, I don't get it, or for me, it's her performance. Because I think what you're describing, having watched this film twice, and I only say that as in it's not like a first run anymore.
Right. Sure. No, of course. Of course.
I don't feel her exasperation connected to the choice she made. I feel her annoyance that these things are happening to her. Do you see what the distinction I'm trying to make there? Like, whereas what you're describing sounds more like what I think the film is after, and clearly on a certain level accomplishes, which is you're an idiot for assigning this much weight to one thing, and because you're an idiot for doing that, we're going to show you just how idiotic it's going to be because we're going to go to hell for it. You know, like
right.
You know who else came to mind as I was thinking through, like who
would play it?
Yeah, I don't have her name in front of me, but Schitt's Creek sister. Like the level of
Alexis.
exasperation and annoyance and ultimate sort of like, anyway, point being, for me at least, the audience surrogate that I think Christine is supposed to be, I just never connected. But you know, you know, all the trappings are zany and fun and wild. I mean, come on. The garage scene with the perfectly placed anvil suspended overhead, like you can't get more next level. Rube Goldberg device. And I guess that's all I'm saying, for me at least, is just what you're taking from it, I like and see. I just don't see what you're describing played. And so it took your outlining some of that to be like, oh, okay, I can sort of see I can see the value you take out of it.
Yeah.
I don't know that I'm there, but you know, whatever.
Which I mean, that's completely fine. That's completely fine. Because I feel like that's what, you know, and I would be interested to hear how listeners, you know, respond to this film and what they think about it. Well, clearly it's up there for them, you know, tops the list, and giving some lip service to the fact that it was neck and neck with Zombieland. Maybe, you know, we extend it one more week, a few more votes come in, maybe Zombieland is the top, but there's no denying that it was at least going to be either first or second, depending on whenever we cut off the voting, you know.
I'll own and will always wonder with some of these earmark horror personalities like a Sam Raimi, like if, you know, if I'd gotten into him at ground zero, hit the ground running, you know, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, and just like, I can see a world where, oh, I'm on board. Like, it doesn't matter.
Sure.
Raimi's doing it. I'm in it. I think coming late, I have a more, not criticizing, but more critical eye I'm coming in with that kind of doesn't work.
Yeah.
For his most fully realized versions of his stuff.
Sure. Anyway. And I can appreciate that. But I mean, I'm fine to pivot over into the fog meter. No, you haven't let me down. No, I got to speak my piece. I got to say, because I'm
glad you did. And I think you make a great case for the value you find in it.
Yeah, because I feel like that's again, that is, I can, you know, in the spirit of last week's conversation where we're trying to, you know, meet ourselves and sort of understand how we feel about it. This is one where I feel like I've got quite a bit of clarity on the reason why I love a film like this is because it allows me for a moment to not take myself so seriously and not take the ways I approach certain choices, because I do put a lot of pressure on myself to always do the right thing, always make the right choice.
I know,
and feeling like, okay, if I don't make the right choice, I'm gonna get dragged to hell. Like, that's gonna be the worst thing. And this film helps me in its way to see, you know what? that's probably a little self-centered and narcissistic and more than a little ridiculous. So let's take a step back. Let's try to have a little bit more of a mature approach, because that's the kind of thinking that lives in a bit of absurdity. Whereas there's a more sort of, a more realized, a more mature, a more whole self, a more full-bodied. It's like this film is almost like the reverse of that Bible verse where they say, like, some have entertained angels unaware.
Sure. Yeah.
This is almost the reverse of that. Of like, don't misstep, because you might have a gypsy curse a button, and then you're in you're in trouble. And like I said, as to reiterate a final point, and then let's definitely pivot to the fog meter, is I feel like there are times in our lives where we position ourselves as if we hold, not only that we hold ultimate power, but maybe that things hold ultimate power over us, and that the choices we make in those arenas are going to damn us, or they're going to, spiral us into. She's either going to live her best life now, and that's the other thing that I think is hilarious about this film, is she makes these choices, and it's like that assistant manager position is all but yours,
Yeah,
and then it's like all these great things are going to happen. So she's either going to climb the ladder and get her best life realized, or she is literally going to go to suffer for all eternity. And I feel like there's a place for us to recognize the absurdity on which the weight we put on these pressures, whether it be, I've got to make sure I get this needle right. I've got to make sure I say this right. I've got to make sure I make the exact right decision. And maybe it would do us some good to be like, that's a little ridiculous. We're taking ourselves a little too seriously. We're putting a little bit too much pressure on it. And I will say, with some spiritual fervency, perhaps giving too many other things more power over us than they deserve. And that's what I glean from a film like Drag Me to Hell, as silly as that may sound.
No,
but,
I mean, I am impressed, and which sounds like a backhanded compliment, or backhanded compliment. I'm not. I don't mean it that way. I think you make a good case for the value of the film, and I like your version, and just a little less gumming
and bile spewing and maggot
blorfing,
vomit and blowhole. Yeah. So with that, why don't you explain the fog meter to our listeners?
Woo! Fog meter. We rank every film on a metric of fear and God. How scary is it? How substantive is it? I will go first on fear, ranking from 1 to 10.
Okay.
It's far more, gross / nasty than it is scary. But you can't kind of discount the gross nasty. So I'm gonna go with a 6 on fear. What about you?
It's got a ton of jump scares too, which, if that frustrates you as a viewer, like if you don't like films that rely on jump scares, that's probably going to be a frustrating film for you. If you enjoy that and kind of find that fun, you might get a lot of fun out of this. I think 6 is an appropriate measurement for its fear, because it's got some genuinely creepy stuff to it, but it also has those layers of comedy. And so 6 kind of feels right for where I want it to be. What would you give it for the God meter?
I intentionally went first on fear to let you go first, but I will honor the question asked. No. Shh. Got it. I love all you've derived, and even see the shadow of what you're describing in the film we have. I think, to give some benefit of the doubt, I will. I'll go with a 6.
Okay. All right. What's interesting, first of all, in a film called Drag Me to Hell, is that our first 3 measurements have been 666. I think that's funny. But the other thing, is, I'm torn a little bit on this, because I think I'm extrapolating something from it, but I am only using the text of the film to do it. So did it have what I extrapolated on its mind, or was that just something that's kind of there for the taking? I don't know. I'm gonna split the difference between like a super high rating and a super low one, and I'm gonna go for a 7 with its general God meter, because honestly I don't know if it had that on its mind or not. But what that fundamentally means is that we give Drag Me to Hell, directed by Sam Raimi, a 6 out of 10 on the fog meter.
I mean,
that is what
it
we
feels like it's supposed to be.
Again, I find it hilarious that our first 3 measurements were 6s. That's just hysterical to me. But
And
I'll
because
go
of that,
first.
we're gonna get dragged to hell.
I'm going to go first on this. I don't think Drag Me to Hell is for everybody. And that's why I say sincerely, to kind of let you off the hook a little bit, I do think you kind of have to get on the wavelength of what it's offering. And if you're on the wavelength for the absurdity, I think you'll have a lot of fun. And I think that if you can kind of get on board with what Sam Raimi does as a filmmaker, you will have a blast watching this film. Because I do think it is, sort of prime rib of the kind of things that he can offer as a filmmaker. So I think in that respect, I would recommend that. It is not something that I'm going to recommend to like my wife or the casual viewer to go check out, a horror film. But I think if you're a horror aficionado, and especially if you're an Evil Dead fan that has not seen this film somehow, you definitely need to seek it out, because I think you'll have a lot of fun. So that's my recommendation. How about for you?
I feel like I'm like kicked out of the club or something.
You're not. You're not. All are welcome to this table.
Right. I think, of course, the Raimi fan, I think it's kind of check the box. Do I recommend it? No, not really. It's
fair.
It pains me a little bit to say that, just because of knowing your affection and people's general fandom of him. But in terms of just like, and which is funny because it sounds like I hated the experience. It was not that, but I did come to a point of being like, yeah, it's not for me. So I don't recommend it to me. And if people like or understand or on board with my typical sensibilities, thus perhaps not to them as well.
Maybe not.
How's that for a weird ass recommendation list?
I get it. Well, listeners, that is your 2009, 2020, 2020 entry. Maybe someday we'll come back around and do like a double feature of Zombieland and Zombieland Double Tap, and we'll give everybody who's like, oh, I really wish that they had covered that instead. We'll give them that opportunity. But next week we will still be with 2020, 2020, counting down your top 10 films of 2010. The voting is closed. The list is tallied. It is what it is. But the film that you will need to prepare yourself for, in drastic contrast to the absurd zaniness of Drag Me to Hell, is the much more sort of dark and heavily oppressive, but still quite impressive film by Darren Aronofsky, Black Swan. So next week, we're going to be counting down your favorites of 2010 and covering Black Swan. Again, won't reveal where it is in the list. Might be top, might be lower. We don't know. But Black Swan is the film to cover for next week. Nathan, thank you for.
You're welcome.
I feel that you've indulged me a bit in allowing me to share
That's
my
what friends are
thoughts
for.
I appreciate that, on Drag Me to Hell, and I thank you for it. Thank you for sharing this conversation with me. I really appreciate it, as always. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in. As we say on every episode, the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, but not the end of the conversation. And in that spirit, we encourage you to fear nothing else and be on your way rejoicing. We'll see you next week, everybody.
See you next week, guys.
Bye.
Stupid cloud. What kind of a dumb technological advancement is that? All right. I feel like I'm just talking to the air.